For thousands of years, Jews and Arabs have stood on opposite sides of a divide that seems eternal, their conflicts echoing through deserts, cities, and history itself. But what if the roots of this struggle trace back to a single moment, a promise whispered under the starlit sands of an ancient wilderness? The story of this rivalry is not just a tale of war, it's a saga of faith, family, and divine destiny that began with one man and two sons, whose choices and legacies still shape our world today. Today, we'll step into the tents of Abraham, a nomad chosen by God to father nations, and uncover the lives of his sons, Ishmael and Isaac. Through their triumphs and trials, we'll explore how a divine covenant sparked both hope and division, giving rise to the peoples we know as Arabs and Jews. From the sun-scorched deserts of Mesopotamia to the modern streets of Jerusalem, this ancient narrative holds the key to understanding a conflict that has spanned millennia, touching the heart of religions, cultures, and geopolitics. We'll trace the threads of this story, revealing how promises made thousands of years ago continue to influence the quest for peace in our time. By the end of this story, you'll see this age-old rivalry through a fresh lens, uncovering a profound truth about division, hope, and the possibility of reconciliation. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a chance to discover a perspective that could change how you view conflict and unity, not only in the Middle East, but in your own life. You'll walk away with a deeper understanding of God's plan and a renewed sense of what it means to bridge divides in a fractured world. Before we dive into this epic tale, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and drop a comment letting us know where you're joining us from. Your city, your country, or even your thoughts on this timeless story. Ready to unravel the origins of a conflict that has shaped nations? What if a single promise, whispered in the endless sands of an ancient desert, could ignite a legacy of both hope and rivalry that echoes through millennia? In the scorching wilderness of Mesopotamia, where the sun blazed relentlessly and the horizon stretched into eternity, a man named Abraham stood at the crossroads of destiny. This was no ordinary moment. It was a divine encounter that would alter the course of human history. Abraham, a humble nomad, was chosen by God for a purpose so grand it seemed impossible: to become the father of a great nation, a beacon of blessing for all peoples. This promise, delivered in the stillness of the desert, was not just a personal vow, but the spark of a saga that would birth two peoples, Jews and Arabs, whose intertwined fates still shape our world today. The story begins in the book of Genesis, where God's voice broke through the silence of Abraham's ordinary life. As Genesis 12:2 declares, "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing." These words were not mere encouragement. They were a covenant, a sacred bond between God and Abraham that promised descendants as numerous as the stars. Imagine the weight of such a pledge. A man already advanced in years, standing beneath a vast sky, hearing that his legacy would outlast the ages. Yet this divine assurance came with a challenge that would test the faith of Abraham and his wife Sarah in ways they could scarcely imagine. The promise was a seed planted in the arid soil of their lives, destined to grow, but not without struggle. It was this very promise that set the stage for a story of hope, heartbreak, and division. A story that still reverberates in the conflicts of the modern Middle East. To understand the depth of this moment, we must step into the world of Abraham and Sarah, a couple whose lives were defined by faith and longing. Abraham, then called Abram, was 75 years old when God called him to leave his homeland of Haran and journey to Canaan, a land unknown but promised. Genesis 12:1-3. Sarah, his beloved wife, stood by his side, sharing his dreams and his burdens. In their culture, children were the ultimate symbol of honor and survival. A man's legacy was measured by his heirs, and a woman's worth was often tied to her ability to bear sons. For Abraham and Sarah, the absence of children was not just a personal sorrow, it was a public shame, a shadow that followed them through the dusty trails of their nomadic life. God's promise in Genesis 12:2 was a lifeline, a beacon of hope in the darkness of their childlessness. "I will make you into a great nation," God declared, a vow that implied descendants beyond counting. But as years turned into decades, the promise remained unfulfilled. Sarah's barrenness was a constant ache, a reminder of the impossible gap between God's words and their reality. Imagine Sarah, now in her late 60s, her hair streaked with gray, gazing at the younger women of their clan, their arms full of children. Each passing year without a child deepened her despair. Yet Abraham clung to faith, trusting that God's timing was perfect, even when it seemed incomprehensible. The cultural context of the time amplified their struggle. In ancient Mesopotamia, fertility was revered, and barrenness was seen as a curse, a sign of divine disfavor. Abraham and Sarah's wealth, tents filled with livestock, servants, and goods, could not fill the void of an empty cradle. Their story resonates with anyone who has ever waited for a dream that seems out of reach, a reminder that even the greatest promises often come with tests of patience and trust. This tension, this longing for a child, would soon lead to a decision that would change their family forever, setting the stage for a rivalry that would span generations. As the years dragged on, Sarah's hope began to fray. The promise of a nation seemed like a distant star, beautiful but unattainable. In her desperation, Sarah turned to a solution rooted in the customs of her time. In ancient Near Eastern societies, a barren wife could offer her servant as a surrogate to bear children on her behalf, a practice that preserved the family line and the wife's status. Sarah, wrestling with her own sense of failure, made a choice that was both pragmatic and heartbreaking. She approached Abraham with a proposal, her voice heavy with resolve. "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my servant Hagar. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Genesis 16:2, paraphrased. Hagar, an Egyptian servant in Abraham's household, was thrust into a role she did not choose. Little is known of Hagar's backstory. Perhaps she was acquired during Abraham's sojourn in Egypt. Genesis 12:16. But her status as a foreigner and a slave made her vulnerable. Imagine Hagar, a young woman far from her homeland, suddenly elevated to the role of concubine. For Sarah, this was a sacrifice, a surrender of her marital intimacy to secure a legacy. For Abraham, it was an act of obedience to his wife's plea, though not without its own emotional cost. And for Hagar, it was a moment of both opportunity and entrapment, a chance to bear a child for a powerful man, but at the price of her autonomy. When Hagar conceived, the dynamics of the household shifted like sand in a storm. The text tells us that Hagar, now pregnant, began to despise Sarah. Genesis 16:4. Perhaps feeling a newfound sense of superiority as the mother of Abraham's heir. Sarah, who had hoped Hagar's child would bring her joy, instead felt mocked by the servant's swelling belly, a living reminder of her own barrenness. The tension between the two women crackled like dry tinder, each glance and word laced with resentment. This moment was not just a personal drama, it was the first ripple of a division that would grow into a historic rift, a foreshadowing of the rivalry between the descendants of Abraham's two sons. Hagar's pregnancy culminated in the birth of Ishmael, a name meaning God hears, a testament to the divine attention that would soon comfort his mother. Genesis 16:15 to 16 records. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. For Abraham, the birth of Ishmael was a moment of profound joy. At 86, he held his firstborn, a living proof that God's promise was beginning to unfold. Imagine Abraham cradling the newborn, his weathered hands trembling with gratitude, believing this boy might be the fulfillment of the covenant. But the joy was short-lived, overshadowed by the growing rift between Sarah and Hagar. Sarah, who had orchestrated this arrangement, now found herself marginalized. Hagar's status as the mother of Abraham's son elevated her in the eyes of the household, and her newfound confidence stung Sarah like a wound reopened. The text hints at Sarah's harsh treatment of Hagar, Genesis 16:6, a response born of jealousy and insecurity. Hagar, once a silent servant, now bore the weight of Sarah's wrath, her joy in motherhood tainted by hostility. The household, once united by the shared hope of God's promise, became a battleground of emotions: love, pride, resentment, and betrayal. This family drama was more than a domestic squabble. It was the crucible in which the identities of two peoples began to form. Ishmael, the son of Hagar, would become the ancestor of many Arab tribes, while Sarah's yet unborn son would father the Israelites. The tensions between Sarah and Hagar were not just personal, they were prophetic, a microcosm of the larger struggles that would define their descendants. As the household fractured, Hagar reached a breaking point, choosing to flee into the wilderness, a decision that would lead to a divine encounter that changed her life. Hagar's flight into the desert was an act of desperation, a bid for freedom from Sarah's cruelty. Picture her stumbling through the barren wilderness, her body heavy with exhaustion, her heart burdened with fear for herself and her unborn child. The desert, with its relentless heat and vast emptiness, was a place of death, a stark contrast to the safety of Abraham's camp. Alone and forsaken, Hagar faced the possibility of losing everything: her son, her future, her very life. In this moment of utter desolation, she was not just a servant or a mother, she was a woman stripped bare, crying out for hope in a world that seemed to have forgotten her. It was here, in the heart of the desert, that God met Hagar. Genesis 16:7-12 recounts how the angel of the Lord found her by a spring and spoke words of comfort and destiny. "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?" The angel's question was not just practical, it was an invitation to acknowledge her pain. Then came the promise: "I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count." Genesis 16:10. The angel also foretold Ishmael's future, describing him as a wild donkey of a man, whose hand would be against everyone, yet he would dwell in the presence of his brothers. Genesis 16:12. This prophecy was both a blessing and a challenge, hinting at Ishmael's fierce independence and the complex legacy he would leave. For Hagar, this encounter was transformative. The desert, once a place of despair, became sacred ground where God saw and heard her affliction. She named the Lord who spoke to her El Roi, meaning the God who sees me. Genesis 16:13, a powerful testament to her newfound faith. Emboldened by this divine assurance, Hagar returned to Abraham's household, carrying not just Ishmael in her womb, but a renewed sense of purpose. The promise given to her mirrored the one given to Abraham, a sign that God's care extended even to those on the margins. Yet her return did not erase the tensions with Sarah, and the stage was set for further conflict as God's plan continued to unfold. This moment in the desert was a turning point, not just for Hagar, but for the story of Jews and Arabs. Ishmael, the child of this promise, would grow to father a great nation, his descendants weaving a rich tapestry across the Arabian Peninsula. But the birth of another son, Isaac, would soon complicate this legacy, deepening the divide that began with Sarah's decision and Hagar's pain. The desert encounter reminds us that even in our darkest moments, hope can emerge, but it also foreshadows the challenges that arise when human choices intersect with divine promises. Could a woman of 90, her body weathered by decades of barrenness, give birth to a nation? In the tents of Abraham, where hope had flickered like a dying flame, a divine miracle was about to prove that nothing is impossible with God. The promise that had sustained Abraham through years of waiting was now poised to unfold in a way that defied human understanding. Sarah, long past the age of childbearing, stood at the threshold of a moment that would not only fulfill God's covenant, but also deepen the rift within their family, setting the stage for a legacy of division that echoes in the conflicts of today. This was no ordinary birth. It was a testament to divine faithfulness, a spark that would ignite both joy and sorrow in the heart of Abraham's household. The story of Isaac's birth is one of the most extraordinary in the book of Genesis, a tale of divine intervention that transformed doubt into celebration. Yet it was also a turning point that intensified the tensions already simmering between Sarah, Hagar, and their sons. As the promise of a son through Sarah came to fruition, the dynamics of the family shifted, revealing the complexities of human emotions: love, jealousy, and the fierce desire to protect one's place in God's plan. This moment, bathed in the light of divine fulfillment, cast long shadows, foreshadowing the struggles that would define the descendants of Abraham's two sons. Years had passed since God first promised Abraham a great nation, and the birth of Ishmael through Hagar had brought a fleeting sense of fulfillment. But God's plan was not yet complete. When Abraham was 99 years old, God appeared to him again, renewing the covenant with a startling announcement. Sarah, his aged wife, would bear a son. Genesis 17:19 records God's words, "Your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him." This was no mere repetition of the earlier promise. It was a precise declaration that the heir of the covenant would come through Sarah, not Hagar, a distinction that would have profound implications for the family. Imagine Abraham's reaction, a mixture of awe and incredulity. At nearly a century old, his body bore the marks of a long life spent wandering the deserts of Canaan. Sarah, now 90, had long since accepted her barrenness as an unchangeable fate. The idea of her giving birth seemed absurd, a notion so far beyond reason that Abraham fell face down and laughed. Genesis 17:17. Yet God's promise was unwavering, accompanied by a command to circumcise every male in the household as a sign of the covenant. Genesis 17:10-14, a physical reminder of God's faithfulness. This ritual, performed on Abraham, Ishmael, and all their servants, bound the family to God's plan, even as the announcement of Isaac's birth hinted at a shift in divine favor. Sarah's own response came later, when she overheard divine visitors confirming the promise. Genesis 18:10-12 recounts the moment. The Lord said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Sarah, listening from the tent, laughed to herself, thinking, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Her laughter was not one of joy, but of skepticism, born from years of disappointment. In a culture where youth and fertility were celebrated, Sarah's age made her a figure of pity among her peers. The promise of a child now seemed like a cruel jest. Yet God rebuked her doubt, asking, "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" Genesis 18:14. This question hung in the air, a challenge to trust in the impossible, setting the stage for a miracle that would redefine their family. The following year, as the seasons turned and the desert bloomed with fleeting life, Sarah's laughter transformed. Genesis 21:1-3 declares, "Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised." Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. The birth of Isaac was nothing short of miraculous, a moment that turned the tents of Abraham into a place of jubilation. At 90 years old, Sarah held her son, her arms trembling with a joy she had never dared to dream. Abraham, now 100, named the boy Isaac, meaning laughter, a name that captured both Sarah's earlier doubt and the overwhelming happiness that now filled their hearts. Sarah's own words in Genesis 21:6-7 reflect this transformation. "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age." Imagine the scene. The clan gathered around, their voices raised in celebration, marveling at the sight of Sarah, her face radiant, cradling a newborn. In their nomadic world, where survival depended on the strength of the next generation, Isaac's birth was a triumph, a sign that God's promise was not just a dream, but a reality unfolding before their eyes. The name Isaac became a symbol of divine faithfulness, a reminder that God could turn impossibility into joy. Yet beneath the surface of this celebration, the birth of Isaac shifted the family's dynamics in ways that would prove irreversible. Isaac was not just a son, he was the child of the covenant, the heir through whom God's promises would flow. His arrival elevated Sarah's status, restoring her honor in a society that valued motherhood above all. But it also cast a shadow over Ishmael, the firstborn son of Hagar, who had once been Abraham's hope for fulfilling God's plan. The joy of Isaac's birth was a double-edged sword, bringing fulfillment to Sarah while deepening the insecurity that would soon erupt into conflict. As Isaac grew, the harmony of Abraham's household began to fray. Ishmael, now a teenager, was a constant presence, his existence a reminder of Sarah's past desperation and Hagar's brief ascendancy. The text in Genesis 21:9 hints at the breaking point. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking. The word mocking suggests more than childish teasing. It implies a challenge to Isaac's position as the favored heir. In a culture where inheritance was paramount, Ishmael's behavior, whether intentional or not, struck at Sarah's deepest fears. She had endured decades of shame as a barren woman, and now with Isaac in her arms, she was determined to secure his future at all costs. Sarah's response was swift and uncompromising. She turned to Abraham, her voice firm with resolve. "Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." Genesis 21:10. This was not a request but a demand, born of a mother's fierce protectiveness and a wife's reclaimed authority. For Sarah, Ishmael's presence threatened the clarity of God's promise, which had singled out Isaac as the covenant heir. Her words were harsh, reducing Hagar to that slave woman and Ishmael to her son, stripping them of their place in the family. This moment revealed the raw power of jealousy and fear, emotions that would resonate through the ages in the rivalry between their descendants. Abraham's heart was torn. Genesis 21:11 notes, "The matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son." Ishmael, now about 14, was not just a child but a young man Abraham had raised, loved, and seen as the answer to God's promise for over a decade. The bond between father and son was deep, forged through years of hope and shared moments in the desert. Yet Abraham faced an agonizing choice: honor his wife's demand or protect his firstborn. The cultural norms of the time gave Sarah significant influence as the primary wife, but Abraham's distress reveals the personal cost of this decision. God's intervention, assuring Abraham that Ishmael would also become a great nation, Genesis 21:13, provided the resolve he needed, but it did not erase the pain of what was to come. In the early dawn, Abraham prepared provisions for Hagar and Ishmael, a skin of water and some bread, and sent them into the wilderness. Imagine the scene. Hagar, her eyes heavy with sorrow, leading a bewildered Ishmael away from the only home he had known. The act of expulsion was not just a physical departure, but a severance of family ties, a moment that crystallized the divide between Sarah's son and Hagar's. As they vanished into the desert haze, Abraham stood watching, his heart heavy with the weight of a choice that would shape the destinies of nations. The wilderness of Beersheba, where Hagar and Ishmael wandered, was a merciless expanse of sand and stone, where survival hung by a thread. The meager supplies Abraham provided soon dwindled, and the water skin ran dry under the unrelenting sun. Hagar, now a mother cast out, faced the unbearable prospect of watching her son die. Genesis 21:15-16 paints a heart-wrenching picture. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down about a bow shot away, for she thought, "I cannot watch the boy die." And as she sat there, she began to sob. Hagar's despair was palpable, her sobs echoing through the desolate landscape. Ishmael, no longer a child, but not yet a man, lay weak and fading, his strength sapped by thirst. In this moment, Hagar was not just a mother, but a woman stripped of all hope, her dreams for her son dissolving like mirages in the heat. The desert, once a place of divine encounter, now seemed a tomb, its silence mocking her cries. Yet even in this darkest hour, God was not absent. Genesis 21:17-19 records, "God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, 'What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation.' Then God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. The miracle of the well was more than a physical rescue. It was a reaffirmation of God's promise to Hagar and Ishmael. Imagine Hagar's trembling hands as she lifted Ishmael, guiding him to the water that glistened like a gift from heaven. As they drank, life returned to their bodies, and hope rekindled in their hearts. The well, a symbol of divine provision, stood as a testament to God's unwavering care, even for those cast out and forgotten. The angel's words echoed the promise given years earlier. Ishmael would not only survive but thrive, becoming the father of a great nation. This moment of deliverance marked a new chapter for Hagar and her son, a chapter that would see them forge a life in the wilderness, laying the foundation for a legacy that would stretch across the Arabian Peninsula. The rescue of Hagar and Ishmael was a pivotal moment, not just for their survival, but for the broader narrative of God's plan. It affirmed that God's promises extended beyond Isaac, embracing Ishmael as a son of Abraham with a destiny of his own. Yet the expulsion and the pain that preceded it left an indelible mark, a wound that would influence the relationship between their descendants. The desert once again became a place of divine encounter, but it also bore witness to the cost of human choices and the enduring hope of God's faithfulness. How could two brothers, born of the same father yet divided by destiny, give rise to nations whose rivalry still shapes the world today? In the sun-scorched deserts of ancient Canaan, Ishmael and Isaac grew under the shadow of their father, Abraham's covenant with God, their lives intertwined yet set on divergent paths. Their story is not just a family saga, but the origin of two peoples, Arabs and Jews, whose histories, cultures, and conflicts trace back to these two sons. As Ishmael carved a life in the wilderness and Isaac carried the mantle of the covenant, their legacies wove a complex tapestry that stretches across centuries, influencing the religious, cultural, and political landscapes of the Middle East. This chapter of their tale reveals how the seeds of division, planted in their childhood, grew into the intricate dynamics of nations, offering a lens through which we can view the tensions of our modern era. The lives of Ishmael and Isaac, though rooted in the same household, unfolded in starkly different ways, each shaped by the promises God made to their mothers and the choices of their parents. Their stories, preserved in the book of Genesis, are more than ancient history. They are a bridge to understanding the enduring struggle between their descendants. From the nomadic tribes of the Arabian Peninsula to the settled cities of Israel, the legacies of these brothers continue to resonate. Their shared heritage a reminder of both division and the potential for unity. As we explore their paths, we uncover the roots of a rivalry that has endured for millennia, yet also glimpse moments of connection that hint at a deeper bond. Ishmael, the firstborn son of Abraham, emerged from the trials of his early years to become a figure of resilience and strength in the wilderness. After the harrowing expulsion from Abraham's camp, he and his mother Hagar forged a new life in the desert of Paran, a vast and unforgiving landscape south of Canaan. Genesis 21:20-21 paints a vivid picture of his growth. God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became an archer. While he was living in the desert of Paran, his mother got a wife for him from Egypt. This brief account reveals Ishmael's transformation into a skilled survivor, a man molded by the harsh realities of his environment, yet blessed by divine protection. Imagine Ishmael, now a young man, his frame lean and weathered by the desert sun, mastering the art of the bow. His skill as an archer was not merely a means of survival, but a symbol of his independence, a testament to his ability to thrive where others might perish. The desert, with its endless dunes and fleeting oases, was both his home and his teacher, shaping him into a leader among the nomadic tribes. Hagar, ever the devoted mother, played a crucial role in his life, securing a wife for him from her native Egypt. This marriage was significant, forging a cultural link between Ishmael's lineage and the rich traditions of the Nile, a connection that would influence the identity of his descendants. The Egyptian wife, though unnamed in the text, brought with her the heritage of a civilization renowned for its wisdom and resilience. Blending with the nomadic spirit of Ishmael's upbringing, God's promise to Hagar that Ishmael would father a great nation came to fruition through his 12 sons, who became the patriarchs of 12 tribes, Genesis 25:13-16. These tribes, known as the Ishmaelites, spread across the Arabian Peninsula, their names, Nebaioth, Kedar, Adbil, and others, echoing through biblical and historical records. The Ishmaelites were renowned as traders and nomads, their caravans traversing the desert routes that connected Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Levant. In Genesis 37:25-28, we see them as merchants transporting spices and myrrh, a glimpse of their economic influence. In Islamic tradition, Ishmael holds an even greater role as a prophet and a key figure in the building of the Kaaba in Mecca, a sacred site that underscores his significance in Arab and Muslim identity. This dual legacy, biblical and Islamic, highlights the profound impact of Ishmael's life, his descendants forming a vibrant mosaic of tribes that shaped the cultural and religious landscape of the region. While Ishmael carved his path in the wilderness, Isaac, the son of Sarah, grew up in the heart of Abraham's camp, destined to carry the covenant that would define the people of Israel. Genesis 21:12 records God's words to Abraham, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned," a clear designation of Isaac as the heir through whom the divine promises would flow. Unlike Ishmael's nomadic existence, Isaac's life was rooted in the land of Canaan, where he would marry Rebekah and father Jacob, the progenitor of the 12 tribes of Israel, Genesis 25:19-26. Jacob's sons, including Judah and Joseph, would become the ancestors of the Israelite nation, their story unfolding through the Exodus, the giving of the law at Sinai, and the establishment of the kingdom of Israel. Isaac's legacy was not just about lineage, but about the covenant itself, a sacred bond that promised land, descendants, and a unique relationship with God. The land of Canaan, with its rolling hills and fertile valleys, became the stage for this promise, a place where Isaac's descendants would face trials, triumphs, and the challenge of living as God's chosen people. The cultural context of Isaac's time emphasized the importance of the firstborn, yet God's choice of Isaac over Ishmael underscored the divine prerogative to work through unexpected means. Isaac's life, though less adventurous than Ishmael's, was marked by quiet faithfulness, as seen in his willingness to trust God during the near sacrifice on Mount Moriah, Genesis 22:1-14, a moment that foreshadowed the redemptive themes central to Israelite faith. The contrast between Ishmael and Isaac's legacies is striking. Ishmael's descendants, the Ishmaelites, embodied the freedom and resilience of the desert, their lives defined by movement and trade. Isaac's descendants, the Israelites, were tied to a specific land and a covenant that demanded adherence to divine laws, as later codified in the Torah. Yet both legacies were rooted in Abraham's faith, their differences reflecting the diverse ways God's promises could unfold. The Israelites would develop a rich tradition of monotheism, law, and prophecy, while the Ishmaelites contributed to the cultural and economic vitality of the ancient Near East. Their influence felt in the markets of Petra and the oases of Arabia. Amid the growing divergence of their paths, a poignant moment of unity brought Ishmael and Isaac together, revealing the enduring bond of their shared heritage. Genesis 25:9 records his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah near Mamre, in the field of Ephron son of Zohar the Hittite. Abraham's death, at the age of 175, was a solemn occasion that drew his two sons back to the land of their childhood. Imagine the scene. Isaac, now a patriarch in his own right, standing beside Ishmael, the desert wanderer, as they laid their father to rest. The cave of Machpelah, a rocky tomb in the heart of Canaan, became a sacred space where past wounds were set aside, if only for a moment, in honor of the man who had shaped their lives. This act of burial was more than a filial duty. It was a powerful symbol of reconciliation. Ishmael, who had been cast out years earlier, returned to join Isaac, suggesting a level of respect and connection that transcended their earlier rivalry. In the ancient Near East, burial rites were deeply significant, a final act of love and loyalty to the deceased. The fact that Ishmael and Isaac performed this task together indicates a shared commitment to their father's legacy, a recognition that they were both sons of Abraham, bound by blood despite their different destinies. The cave of Machpelah, later the resting place of Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Leah, became a monument to the family's enduring ties, a physical reminder of their common roots. This moment of unity, though fleeting, offers a glimpse of what might have been, a world where the descendants of Ishmael and Isaac could coexist in harmony. It stands as a counterpoint to the tensions that had defined their early years, hinting at the possibility of healing even the deepest divides. Yet as their descendants forged separate paths, this moment of togetherness would become a rare exception in a history marked by competition and conflict, a poignant reminder of the shared humanity that underlies their rivalry. The legacies of Ishmael and Isaac, though born in the ancient deserts, continue to shape the modern world, their influence evident in the complex relationship between Arabs and Jews. The Ishmaelites, descendants of Ishmael, became the forebears of many Arab tribes, their nomadic traditions and trading networks laying the groundwork for the cultural and religious identity of the Arabian Peninsula. In Islamic tradition, Ishmael's role as a prophet and his connection to the Kaaba link him directly to the Arab people, who see themselves as heirs to his legacy. The Israelites, descendants of Isaac through Jacob, developed into the Jewish people, their history defined by the covenant, the land of Israel, and a faith that has endured through exile and restoration. The divergence of these legacies set the stage for centuries of interaction, both cooperative and contentious. In biblical times, the Ishmaelites and Israelites crossed paths as traders and neighbors, their encounters ranging from peaceful commerce to occasional conflict. By the time of the Roman Empire, the descendants of Ishmael had spread across the Middle East, while the Jews faced dispersion after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE. The rise of Islam in the 7th century, with its reverence for Ishmael, further shaped Arab identity, while Judaism evolved through rabbinic traditions, maintaining its focus on the covenant through Isaac. The modern conflict between Jews and Arabs, particularly in the context of Israel and Palestine, is a complex tapestry woven from these ancient threads. The establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 marked a turning point, reigniting tensions over land and identity. For Jews, the return to the land promised to Abraham and Isaac was a fulfillment of biblical prophecy, a homecoming after centuries of persecution. For Palestinians, many of whom trace their heritage to the broader Arab world, the creation of Israel represented displacement and loss, a challenge to their own historical claims. The wars that followed, 1948, 1967, 1973, and the ongoing struggle for Palestinian statehood reflect a clash of narratives, each rooted in the legacies of Isaac and Ishmael. Yet this conflict is not merely a continuation of ancient rivalries, but a product of modern political, economic, and cultural forces. The land that both peoples claim, Jerusalem, Hebron, Gaza, carries the weight of sacred history, with sites like the Cave of Machpelah, revered by Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike. The differences between Judaism, with its focus on the Torah, and Islam, centered on the Quran, add layers of complexity, shaping how each group views its relationship to the land and to each other. While the biblical story of Ishmael and Isaac hints at division, it also points to moments of unity, like their shared burial of Abraham, suggesting that the path to peace lies in recognizing their common heritage. The modern struggle, though rooted in history, is not the inevitable outcome of God's promises. The covenant with Abraham was meant to bless all nations, Genesis 12:3, a vision that transcends tribal loyalties. As we reflect on the legacies of Ishmael and Isaac, we see a story of two brothers whose differences shape nations, but whose shared moments of connection offer hope for a future where their descendants might find common ground. The deserts of Canaan and the streets of Jerusalem are not just battlegrounds. They are places where the echoes of an ancient promise call for understanding and reconciliation. The saga of Abraham, Ishmael, and Isaac is more than an ancient story. It's a mirror reflecting the complexities of human division and the enduring hope of unity. From the deserts where promises were made to the modern struggles over sacred lands, their legacies reveal that even the deepest rifts begin with shared roots. While the descendants of Ishmael and Isaac, Arabs and Jews, have clashed across centuries, God's vision has always been one of blessing for all nations, a call to rise above rivalry with love, understanding, and reconciliation. Their story reminds us that our differences, though real, are not the final word. The promise of peace, rooted in faith, remains within reach. What lessons from this ancient tale can inspire you to heal divides in your own world? Whether it's a family feud, a community conflict, or a broader struggle, how can the story of Ishmael and Isaac guide us toward unity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We're eager to hear your reflections and stories of hope. May we be inspired by these truths and strive to be bearers of light in a world in desperate need of healing and reconciliation. Through prayer, mutual understanding, and loving action, we can contribute to the divine plan of unity, where all nations come together in worship of their Creator. If you enjoy this video and these reflections, be sure to like, subscribe, and click on one of the videos that will appear on your screen. They will bring more powerful lessons and biblical revelations that I am sure you will love. Thanks for watching. Hugs to you, and stay with the Lord.